Hello folks, I'm Rupert Soskin.
And I'm Michael Bott. We're the Prehistory Guys, and welcome to another Calanais conversation. Today we're delighted to be talking with Professor Roberto Trotta, a theoretical physicist and cosmologist based at the International School for Advanced Studies in Trieste, in Italy.
Roberto is an international science communicator and author. Amongst other engagements and activities, he is also a visiting professor of astrostatistics at Imperial College London.
Now, Roberto has a particular fascination for humanity's relationship with the night sky and prehistory. And in this regard, there are few places in the world as significant as Calanais, so we invited him along to chat about it.
Roberto, welcome to Calanais Conversations. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Just to kick off with, tell the viewers about yourself, who you are, what it is that you actually do in relation to astronomy.
Well, such a pleasure to be here with you. And I am an astrostatistician. That's to say, I'm a cosmologist by training. So I studied theoretical physics at university, and then I went into cosmology. So my main core academic activity is to try to understand the universe all around us, the large-scale universe. So how it came to be, the origin and properties of the Big Bang. What is the universe made of? Dark matter, dark energy, all this mysterious dark stuff. And I do so using complex big data and advanced statistical methods, and increasingly nowadays, artificial intelligence.
Right. Now, I have to confess, haven't read it yet, Roberto, but you're the author of a very successful book called Starborn. In fact, it was BBC Radio's 4's Book of the Week a year ago.
Yes.
When it came out in hardback. And I believe is it yesterday it was published?
Yes, in paperback, yes.
In paperback, yeah. I mean, it's also on Kindle, and I think it's an audio book as well. But anyway, tell us about Starborn, what it's about, and why you think it's resonated with so many people.
Yes, Starborn is a book that asks a rather counterfactual question. That's to say, what would have happened to us as a species had we been fated to live on a planet where nobody ever saw a star? In other words, I imagine this counterfactual universe in which the Earth is exactly identical to our own, but covered forever everywhere in clouds, which is perhaps not an unusual feeling for people like myself who have lived for 15 years in the UK. That's something that I can relate to. But what about if nobody had ever seen a star or the disk of the sun or the moon or the planets? What would have changed in our lives? And when I started digging into this question, I discovered that everything would be different. And so I uncovered a lot of subterranean, unsuspected, surprising connections between us, not just how we live today in the technology and the physics and the astronomy, but us as people, us as species, and the stars. And so I try to uncover the hidden influence of the stars on us from prehistory to today.
You were at Calanais last June, weren't you? To try to see the moon doing its major standstill. Can you explain to the viewers exactly what the standstill is and how it relates to Calanais specifically?
Yes, Calanais, of course, is such a magical place, and I was lucky to come back for a second visit in June 24. In fact, Calanais was one of the inspirational places that led me to write the book in the first place. So for me, it's a place I'm really strongly connected with. And so in June 24, I came back to witness, the solstice, of course, but also this perhaps even more unique phenomenon, which is this major lunar standstill, which happens about every 19 years, a little bit less. There's a cycle in the way the moon moves around the Earth, and in particular, the setting and rising points of the moon, they go through a 19-year-long cycle, which was perhaps already referenced in antiquity by Roman historians when they talk about the winged temple of the Hyperboreans, which perhaps was a reference to Calanais itself. And the Romans talked about this mythological visit by the goddess to the temple, and the goddess was perhaps the full moon, doing this very special thing, which can only be witnessed because of the particular location of Calanais. During the major standstill, the moon rises to the northernmost point in its 19 years period, and it sets very shortly afterwards, and it just skims the horizon, the old woman in the moors, as seen from the tip of the Calanais stones. And that's a magical event, and one in which the moon full and very, very close to the horizon will look huge to any observer because of the usual sort of illusion of the fact that the moon close to the horizon looks like a supermoon. And imagine this moon then appearing and disappearing between the stones at Calanais, and for sure this would have been an incredible event, perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime event for our ancestors and the people who built Calanais. They were certainly aware of it. They cannot have missed it. And that's what I went back to try and catch myself, because I talk about this in the book. I was very inspired by all of these references, and I wanted to experience it myself.
So how was it last year? What did you actually see last year? Was the weather good?
Well, there was a weather, that's for sure. The atmosphere was amazing. There were lots of people, gathering for the solstice itself and the double whammy of the major standstill. So we stayed out the night. There was a camera was rigged up. There was a live stream. There was people singing, dancing, chanting, doing rituals, whatnot. A very colorful crowd, shall we say. But the moon just briefly, ever so briefly, appeared between the clouds. We were hopeful that it would clear up in time, but it just didn't. And we did get this tantalizing glimpse of the full moon. So it was there, we could see it, but we didn't get the full experience, I'm afraid. So it's, 19 years, not a 19 years wait, I'm afraid.
Okay. Till the next time. I'll tell you what, more generally, Roberto, what role do you think the stars took in the lives of our prehistoric ancestors? And do you think you can speculate on the impact that awareness of the cosmos may have had on them?
That's a question that I investigated in some depth in my book, because of course when you think about the influence of the stars on history, then many things come immediately to mind. Astronomy, and from there physics, and therefore technology depended on the stars. Navigation, timekeeping, all of the early calendars were lunar calendars. So there are many things that come to mind in terms of our historical connection with the stars, and those are well documented. But to me, perhaps the most fascinating part was trying to go deeper and further back in history to prehistory, when of course traces become scant and the evidence has to be interpreted, and hypotheses find very little confirmation. But in my opinion, the stars played a major role in establishing our supremacy over the Neanderthals about 50,000 years ago. The big mystery of why are we here? Why are the Neanderthals not the dominant human species on the planet? After all, they've had 600,000 years head start over us before we came along and trotted out of Africa. They were superior physically. They were, Olympians essentially compared to us. A handshake by a Neanderthals could crush the bones of your hand, and they were not the brutes that they used to be depicted as. They were actually skilled craft people. They had control of fire. They used art, and probably also buried their dead. So intellectually, they were perhaps our equals in many respects. So why did they disappear 42,000 years ago when we coincidentally started colonizing Europe? And I believe that a knowledge and an awareness of the stars really played a major part for our species, because if you think about it, being able to interpret in some intuitive fashion the reappearance of stars over the seasons, the full moon period, and so on, would give our ancestors crucial evolutionary advantage in terms of finding resources, navigating, knowing when to predict the migration of birds and other animals, and the availability of resources, natural resources like food. If you can somehow connect the period in the heavens to what happens to the nature around you, you're going to have a major evolutionary advantage. And my hypothesis, for which I try to find some supporting evidence in the book, is that Homo sapiens did have this advantage, and that was a crucial part in determining our survival when the going got tough with rapidly changing weather and climate and ice ages coming and going. The Neanderthals had seen it all before. We didn't. We survived, and they didn't.
I can't wait to read the book now, Roberto.
Indeed, yeah.
That's fascinating stuff. It's just one more thing. We often find ourselves, Rupert and I, when we're talking about anything to do with archaeoastronomy, we try to reiterate and land for people the fact that our relationship to the sky is profoundly different to any relationship that they had back then, because we don't look at it, we don't see it. And you're saying living in a cloudy UK, you're unlikely. But even then, a starry night sky without light pollution is a very, very different experience. And so, can you say anything about how you feel many people in prehistory had a much closer relationship to the cosmos in the first place?
Absolutely. I think this is crucial in many respects, because the stars and the heavens have always exerted an incredible fascination on humankind throughout history. And it's only in the last 150 years or so that we started losing that, because we are no longer able to see the sky. In our major cities, we don't see the sky anymore. We don't care about it. And the paradox of our age is that, of course, these beautiful pictures of the deep cosmos are within our fingertips, a click away on the internet, yet we no longer know any of the actual lived experience of the sky. And I believe that had a profound influence on our ancestors, not just for their survival, as we discussed, but also psychologically, spirituality. All of the big gods always lived in the sky, and that the beauty and the majesty and the mystery of the night sky could not have failed to deeply impress themselves upon our collective psyche. And I think we've lost that consciously, but unconsciously it's still there somewhere. And if we can bring it back and relate back to the skies and go out and find dark skies and recapture a little bit of that wonder and awe, I think we would all be better served for it.
Roberto, I feel there are further conversations afoot, but I think yes, for the moment this one must draw to an end. Thank you so much for being with us. It's even these few minutes have been absolutely fascinating talking to you. So most grateful.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thanks ever so much, Roberto. And yes, we'll continue this conversation another time. Thanks very much. You take care.